Welcome. Hi. Please take a seat. This is Articulate Design's Coffee Emporium, and it's my absolute pleasure to meet you today. You will be our 2 o'clock. Is that correct? Good. Okay. Now, I believe somebody very special in your life has bought you the companion package along with one of these little Nespresso coffee machines. Is that correct? Good. Okay. And the companion package, basically, it's a one-on-one consultation. The shop is closed. We sit down. I take you through a little bit of the history of coffee, its origins. We'll sample some of our finest blends. We'll discuss some of the misconceptions with coffee, some of the more interesting blends of the world, and at the end of the day, you'll be able to take away 3 of our finest capsule blends, and also a complete bag of ground coffee, and a couple of chocolate bars. Actually, we have delicious chocolate here. Does that sound good? Okay, before we get started, I think I should get us a drink. Now, I treat everyone as if they're completely ignorant of any coffee history, information, taste, flavor. If you feel like I'm insulting you at any time, please say so. But I think there are a lot of people in the world that talk about coffee as if they have some extensive knowledge when they really don't. With me, however, you're in safe hands. I do not pretend to know everything, but I think you'll find what I have to say really rather interesting. And of course, very relaxing. Okay. How would you normally drink coffee if somebody was to ask you if you like a cup? Maybe you're not even a coffee drinker. Okay, that's fine. See, the thing with coffee is, you might ask somebody, do you like coffee? And they'll say no. And this will be based on an experience that they've had where a friend has tried to introduce them to coffee and they didn't like it. But this is somewhat of a frustration for me because me being an Englishman, I also am quite partial to tea. Now, tea, like coffee, has a very vast array of different flavors and different blends. And if I was trying to, introduce one of my friends to tea and I offered them a fruit tea, they might taste it and say, I don't like this. Then when they go away, this friend will then tell the world, I don't like tea. Tea isn't for me. When they hadn't tried a standard breakfast tea that's quite famous in England and Great Britain. Whereas if I originally had tried the breakfast tea, maybe the friend would have enjoyed it. And then when asked if they like tea, they would say yes. Coffee is no different. If somebody has tried coffee in the past and they didn't like it, instead of then believing they don't like coffee, we at Articulate Design Coffee House Emporium will open their eyes a little bit and broaden their coffee horizons. There are a multitude of coffees, all with different flavors, blends, balances, textures, and we're going to experience some of them today. Okay. Now, I also just baked some Belgian cookies. Now, these aren't actually part of the deal, but they taste amazing, and I'd very much like for you to have one. Okay, I'm gonna whip us up a couple of lattes. Maybe start off with something like a Kenyan blend, and I'll show you what we have on offer. We'll discuss some things. I said I'll tell you a little bit about the history of coffee, and we'll go from there. How does that sound? Good. Give me a moment. Now, this is a Kenyan blend that I'm very excited for you to try. And please do take a cookie. You'll love them, I guarantee. Of course, I also made myself. It's absolutely delicious. Coffee brewed properly. It's just lovely. Now let me take a few bites of this equally as delicious cookie. The sweetness of the cookie blends so perfectly well with the latte. Okay. Now I think we can get started. Okay. As I said, I'd like to give you a little bit of information as to the background of coffee. There are quite a lot of common misconceptions with coffee, and we here at Articulate Design Coffee Emporium House, we like to dispel these things and replace them with as factual as we can be. Now, coffee is rumoured, and this hasn't really been proven, but it's been rumoured to have been in circulation since the 10th century. However, it isn't really with any kind of substantial evidence that we can prove it. It wasn't until the 15th century that it made an appearance in the history books. It appeared in some of the monasteries in Yemen in the 15th century. And then in the 16th century, it worked its way into Asia, in the Horn of Africa. And it wasn't really until the 17th, almost 18th century that it appeared in what we would now call the New World. And from there, it became far more common. And it wasn't actually until the Boston Tea Party, I think in 77, the Boston Tea Party? I'd need to check that. But the Boston Tea Party basically made it patriotic to drop the more commonly drunk tea in favour of coffee. And then coffee, especially in America, really took flight and started gaining attraction and popularity. Which brings us to where we are today. Coffee is now an integral part of our lives, and I don't think it's silly to be mindful of caffeine and its effects that it can have on the human body and the brain and day-to-day functions. Now, caffeine has never really had any significant impact or effect on me as a person. In fact, I can quite happily drink decaffeinated coffee, which is a bit sacrilegious to be said in a coffee house. But caffeine has always done very little for me. I drink coffee purely for the flavour. Okay? But as I said, that said, be mindful of coffee stimulant, caffeine. If you drink 10 cups of espresso or 10 shots of espresso, there are going to be ramifications and repercussions. Okay? I know it's a bit boring to talk health and safety, but it's part of my job. Okay. Now I'd like to introduce to you the first blends that we can expect in your companion bundle. Okay? Now, this is a Kenyan blend. It's a Kenyan heirloom, as it's known, Now, Kenyan beans tend to be quite fruity, quite playful, and actually have a far shorter roasting time. Now, I think it's quite pertinent that I explain exactly what kind of process a coffee bean has to go through and why it is we even roast coffee beans in the first instance. So, coffee beans, we know them as these black little pellet-like objects. I do apologize, but coffee's lovely. Coffee beans are actually green and quite soft. And the reason we roast them is because if you try to grind a green native coffee bean, it's quite rigid and kind of falls apart and really doesn't blend and roast very well. In fact, I've actually tasted, we have actually blended or grinded and drank green coffee beans, and it's really very unpleasant. We did actually offer it as part of the experience here at Articulate Designs Coffee House, and we decided to stop it because people just were left with this horrible, very bitter taste in their mouth. Not something that we want to associate with our experience here, so we scrapped it. But take it from me, green coffee beans without roasting are really very unpleasant. In fact, you can actually roast your own beans. And the way it works is that you start off with a green coffee bean and they're roasted, and depending on the duration of the roast is really what makes the flavor of the coffee. Now, different beans are subject to different lengths of roast, and you might have heard a light roast, French roast, Spanish roast, Italian roast. There are generally two categories for roasting beans. Okay? Now, the first category, you actually start at cinnamon roast. Then it goes light roast, medium roast, house roast, city house roast. And what this essentially is that the coffee bean is roasted and heated to the point of it cracks and pops. And this first crack is oxygen and water releasing from the bean. Now, the moment this pop happens, this coffee bean essentially is ready for brewing. Okay, it needs to be ground and then brewed. If you continue to roast, it leaves this first category of roast and becomes what's known as a dark roast. If you continue to go, the coffee bean will actually pop again. And when it pops the second time, it's releasing carbon dioxide. And once you hear this second crack, you're now towards the upper end of what's called a dark roast. You'll get a French roast, an Italian roast, and the most roasted a bean can ever be is a Spanish roast. And by the time you get to Spanish, the property of the bean is now completely overshadowed by the taste almost of charcoal, like a burn kind of taste. At the lighter end, it kind of group one, the light roast and the cinnamon roast. This really is the flavor of the bean. The roast is just really making the coffee brewable. Once you start to go down the slide towards the dark roast territory, more subtle and gentle flavored beans cannot be subject to a dark roast because the bean just loses all its flavor. Okay, and only really the more full-bodied, stronger, darker beans can take a complete dark roast and still retain some of the original flavor. However, as I said, you can buy your own green beans, and they're actually really quite cheap. When I say green beans, I mean green coffee beans. Don't go and buy green runner beans. They don't brew very well. But yeah, you can actually roast your own beans, and it can be done as simply as in an oven on a little kind of cookie tray or a skillet. Put it in the oven. The issue with doing it in the oven is that the beans aren't subject to an all-over roast. So obviously the top facing the flame in the heat is scorched, and the underside of the bean is really still quite green. The best way, and as far as I'm aware, the most efficient way to home roast your own beans would be to buy a popcorn popper. Now, if you don't know what that is, when you're home, have a little look on Amazon or Google. You can pick these things up secondhand, and obviously they're designed for popcorn kernels, but they work surprisingly well with coffee beans. And all a popcorn popper does, if you imagine a coffee grinder with a little bowl, imagine a coffee grinder without the teeth and the blade, and the beans just sit in this little pot, has a kind of large cover, and the beans are just circulated and exposed to quite high volumes of heat. But because they're circulating and they're always turning, you get a far larger surface area, so the bean gets a more complete roast. And you, again, be surprised at how quickly a bean can roast. After about a minute and a half, you can expect to hear the first crack. And as I said, anything after the first crack, a bean can then be ground and brewed. I'd imagine for kind of a medium roast, which is where most people like to drink their coffee, you're looking at kind of about the 2 minute 10 mark. Anything after that, and as I said, you're stepping into a darker kind of roast. Anyway, I do digress. You'll have to forgive me, I'm extremely passionate about coffee and some of the flavors that can be attributed to coffee beans. Now, back to our Kenyan blend. The reason I went into so much depth about the roasting is because it has such a profound impact on the bean and the flavor you can expect in your cup. Now, the Kenyan blend rates 6, and this is on a scale of 12, and this is really just in strength and in depth of coffee. And the Kenyan blend is one of my favorites. Actually, all the blends we have here at the coffee house are some of my favorites. But the Kenyan, because it's quite fruity, and as I said, the roasting of this bean, the duration is far shorter, but it's quite a high temperature, so the bean is kind of flash roasted. It encourages the big fruity flavors of the Kenyan, and it's really, really rather tasty. As I said, it's a very playful little coffee. I encourage you to try it. This, of course, will be included in your hamper. Okay, it's the first blend. Now, the second blend is actually a Brazilian blend. Now, Brazilian beans are predominantly a middle to dark roast kind of spectrum. You can expect a walnut and toffee flavor in your cup. Very, very pleasant for your taste buds. I'd like to show you also what our capsules look like. They're unbranded, but perfectly stylish. You just slot that into your brand new machine, push the button, this little film is punctured, and it runs water through the capsule, and your house is suddenly left with this beautiful and amazing aroma. A fun fact for you, actually. It's said that if you're in the market to sell your house, you should brew coffee for a couple of hours beforehand, because there's something in a human being's brain that's attracted to the coffee smell and makes them more likely to purchase your house. That's true. But this is, as I said, this is our Brazilian brand. It's called Yellow Bourbon, and it's full-bodied, full of flavor, quite rich. Maybe more of a midday after lunch kind of coffee. It's just over the realms of a medium roast, but very, very, very flavorful. you'll get a lot of enjoyment from a Brazilian bourbon. Guaranteed. Now, the third Nespresso compatible capsule coffee that we offer is the infamous Indian Karnataka. Now, the Karnataka is a very, very intense, dark, very smoky blend of coffee. It's roasted for a very long time, quite a low heat actually, but they're roasted to the point that the coffee still retains a lot of its original flavor, but it's almost dangerously close to being overshadowed by the smoky, richness of the roast. You can expect to find chocolatey, spicy overtones from your coffee. Now, a lot of people like to start their day with a dark roast. Not me. I like to kick things off with a nice light, fruity canyon blend. But, well, as they say, it's horses for courses. I think relaxing in the evening after a nice meal with a dark roast is just perfect. You can sit there. It's dark and it's rich. It's very flavorful. It's very strong, but it just washes a lovely meal down perfectly. But I do warn you, it's a very strong roast. But so very tasty. Okay. I think you're gonna like our Indian blend. I can even smell it through the packaging. Okay. Now, those are our 3 Nespresso capsule blends. However, as promised, we also grind our own coffee. And this is actually a Guatemalan blend. And it's my favorite kind of coffee. The Guatemalan, to me, is the quintessential medium roast coffee. It's stronger than the Kenyan, okay, but it sits on the right side of medium roast. For me, it doesn't step into the realms of the dark roast. It maintains all the properties of the bean, but still gives that little bit of a kick. It's a very smooth roast. I really think you're gonna like this. This is one of these Sunday afternoon, you get your little percolator out, put in a couple of spoonfuls of this, pour in your hot water, and just let it stew for a couple of minutes. Then pour, and some people like sugar, some people like it it's called Americano, it's black. I like mine with black and 2 sugars, so it's quite dark, very sweet. I have about 3/4 of a cup, and it's really just a very enjoyable blend. I thoroughly enjoy the Guatemalan. That will also be included in your package. Now, I think it's long been mused and agreed upon that the absolute perfect partner in crime to a lovely blend of coffee is, of course, a fantastically delicious bar of chocolate. Now, will be 2 included in your bundle. 72% pure cocoa, dark chocolate. Now, since I'm considered the expert, I'd like to make a recommendation. I would pair this 72% with the Indian. A really dark coffee goes extremely well with a dark chocolate. I'm not sure what it is, but they just blend together so perfectly well. The Indian doesn't go as well with a lighter and gentle milk chocolate. It just seems to, the flavors just complement each other so perfectly in your mouth. A dark chocolate and a dark roast. I, of course, would blend the milk chocolate with the Kenyan. The fruitiness of the Kenyan blend with the soft creaminess of the milk chocolate makes for a delicious, delicious little dance on the palate. Absolutely beautiful. Now, don't be like me. Try not to eat the entire bar in one sitting. I do this every time. I always say to myself that I will pace myself. I will make sure that I make the bar last for at least a week. Sunday night arrives. Out comes the Kenyan blend. And out comes this bar of milk chocolate. But life's for living. And it's important to keep smiling. Okay. I'd like to review what it is that we're including in your package today, okay? We will have the fruity and spectacular Kenyan blend. This, as I said, is a very playful little coffee. I love it. We will have the medium to kind of dark roast Brazilian yellow bourbon, toffee and well, like a toasted kind of walnut overtone. Perfect for, as I said, your after lunch, midday kind of coffee. Very, very tasty. And it's 8 out of the 12 in strength. It's just over the medium roast line. The Indian, as I said, is a kind of your late night after dinner kind of coffee. It's a 10 out of 12, and as I said, you can expect a chocolatey, spicy, almost a little bit of a tobacco-y overtone. Not tobacco in the sense of the horrible, nicotine-y, horrible smell. More of an earthy, rich flavor. I don't drink the dark roast very often, but when I do, I thoroughly enjoy them. And that's the Indian blend. Very tasty. And of course our ground coffee Guatemalan blend. Now, the Guatemalan is similar to the Kenyan, but maybe a little bit stronger, maybe a 7 touching 8. A little bit stronger than the Kenyan. Maybe not quite as strong as the Brazilian yellow bourbon. But a lovely, lovely blend. Full of flavor. And it has almost a honey-like smoothness to it. Makes a perfect latte. It really does. And of course, last but by no means least, your 2 exquisite and exclusive bars of some of the finest chocolate you can find. The milk chocolate, I said, it pairs very well with the Kenyan blend. And the 72% cocoa, the dark chocolate, pairing again quite well with the Indian blend. Okay, this does conclude your coffee consultation. We'll actually prepare your little hamper for you. We'll get it all wrapped up. It'll be ready in 5-10 minutes for you to take home. And I, from the bottom of my heart, hope you have enjoyed your experience. Please feel free to come back to Articulate Designs Coffee House Emporium anytime you like. It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you. Please do take care, and see you again soon.